Hey guys, and welcome to another Pagnotta Take on Sports special. This week we're going to do the Pac-12 preview for college football season, being just 8 days away from the kickoff of the college football season. But tonight I do want to start with a little bit of a different story. As you guys do know, there was a terrible, horrible tragedy that happened earlier today in Roanoke, Virginia. Two young journalists, one an on-air personality, Allison Parker, 24, and cameraman Adam Ward, 27, were shot and killed on the job. They were covering a local story on a reservoir of some sort that had been coming back up after a flood or something like that, and one of their former coworkers walked up behind them and shot them to death in an execution style, and taped the whole thing, then actually put it online. Just sickening to see that happen, but he is dead, and I think we speak for an entire nation when we say that we, in some way, we are happy that this evil is off this earth, and that God did take him off this earth for what he did. He will be punished in the correct way, I believe, in the hands of God. But I think it's something that definitely has to be addressed. I think definitely because it was in the journalism field, which is the field that I do want to go into. And being an aspiring journalist, having a lot of friends that have thought about going into a career like this, it's something that is scary to know that this could happen, to someone in our field, to something, in the way that it did, and to someone that was, people that were so innocent, that were there to just do their job and do something that they loved, and to be killed in the way they were, and to lose their lives at such a young age is just horrible. And I hope that as a nation we can become stronger off of this, and find a way to get through this. It's a horrible tragedy, but I think it's something that we have to give these people these families their space, while still feeling showing our pain and our grief for them, from a safe distance. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that, but I thought I would just address that. To those journalists that passed away, 24-year-old Allison Parker and 27-year-old Adam Ward. I didn't personally know you, but being a person that wants to go into this field, it definitely hurts. And rest in peace to both of you guys. And the condolences and prayers go out to their families. So from there, I'm going to move on and start talking a little bit about the college football that I was planning to do to start out. So as we jump into the Pac-12, when you look at the Pac-12, I think we'll start with the Pac-12 North, of course, which is what people were used to being the more interesting side of the Pac-12. For a while, the Pac-12 North was the power of the Pac-12. Now, it's not even really close. The Pac-12 South is the powerhouse, but we'll talk about them a little bit later. But we start in the Pac-12 North, and we're going to start like we usually do, from the bottom. We'll start with Oregon State, who I have finishing 6th in this conference, a 3-9, 1-8 year from what I've seen with this football team. When I look at it, I think Gary Anderson, first-year coach, he's coming in to a situation that's a little bit tough. They lose their best quarterback that they've had really in a while, in Sean Mannion, who ended up exhausting his time on campus. They also lost their best wide receiver from a year ago as well. So I mean, they having to replace both of those guys is going to be just an adventure to try to see if they can end up replacing those guys. I mean, when you look at it, the quarterback position, they are in a little bit of a deep spot here, considering the fact that the people vying for this starting position, they do have 3 guys, but all of them are freshmen, so none of them have had in-game experience. The only guy that did have in-game experience out of the quarterbacks that were on their roster was Luke Del Rio, but he is not considered a factor in this quarterback race anymore. It's going to come down to either Seth Collins, Nick Mitchell, or Marcus McMarion. So when you look at it, most people think that they're probably going to end up going with the true freshman, Seth Collins. He's the most talented out of all the guys, but again, no in-game experience. This dude's coming fresh out of high school, so he hasn't even had a summer to get used to this team yet. So when you look at it, it's going to be pretty tough, really, seeing them doing any damage here with a true freshman quarterback out there. But he does have a couple of pieces around him to help him. The run game, Storm Woods does return after having a solid year last year, 766 yards and 5 touchdowns. So D's definitely a guy that they have to keep an eye on. To maybe make a big impact right there. Guy behind him, a speedster, and Chris Brown could also make an impact if they need to change a pace back. But Storm Woods is going to be the main focus in that run game. He's going to have to perform pretty well if Oregon State's wanting to have any success. At the wide receiver position, you really turn to Victor Bolden to be your main guy. He had 72 catches, 798 yards, and 2 touchdowns a year ago. But besides him, there really is no one that's really any sort of threat at the wide receiver position. Guys like Hunter Germon, Jordan Vermillion, and Richard Mullaney will all try to get their name into the hat when it comes to trying to find receptions on this team, and all of them should have a chance to really show their stuff. Vermillion, I think, is the guy, when you look at his stats from last year, has a chance to break out. He had 35 catches, 578 yards, and 6 touchdowns. The guy's 6'4" and weighs 235, so he's a big dude. And if they can put him in the slot and he can become a presence, he might feel a little bit kind of like a Devin Funchess maybe type feel out there. And if they can get someone like that in there for a true freshman quarterback with the speed of Victor Bolden, you just never really know how that may end up working out for them. When you look on the offensive line, some talent does return there. Sean Harlow, the offensive tackle, the left tackle, he does return, as well as Dustin Stanton, the other tackle on the right side. They both return. Gavin Andrews, a senior, as well as Josh Mitchell, another senior, also return on the interior line. Only the left guard position is in question right now, but Fred Leuna is expected to slide in there as a sophomore. So when you look at this offense for Oregon State, it's not going to be this juggernaut that they've had over the past couple of years. Maybe not a juggernaut, but a passing juggernaut at least. That aspect may have left this team, with them having to now start a true freshman at quarterback. The run game is going to have to be a lot better. 110th in the nation last year is not where they need to be. Storm Woods, I think he's going to really be the focal point of that offense. If you're Gary Anderson coming in there, I mean, we know he's come over from Wisconsin, so it's going to be more run-based. We know that. That's what he's going to want to do. Storm Woods is going to have to show that he can handle that load. Chris Brown could be that change of pace that could definitely help him. And if he can get some of these receivers to work with Bolden, maybe get another guy like Vermillion in there to work, they could make a little bit of noise offensively. Now, defensively, I think is where their real problem is, though. They only return 2 starters on the defense up front. They return Joshua James, a senior, but he's the only returning guy on that defensive line. They only run 3 defensive linemen, so that does help a little bit. But they have to find guys that can take over, like guys like Jalen Grimble. Kyle Pecco is expected to be the guy at the nose guard position, and their leading sack guy from a year ago who had 4.5, Levante Barnett, is not even expected to start. So that could be a problem there, but that defensive line could be in flux throughout the year. At the linebacker position right there, they do run a 3-4 defense, so this is a huge position. Nobody returns here. The most experienced guys are Kyle Haley and Romel Mego, but they're not the guys that they're really talking about. It's more of the young guys in Daryl Sanjay and Bright Bright Ugwabu. Both of those guys will be playing big-time minutes, and they're expected to step up. Iguabu, who is a true freshman. So that's one thing to definitely keep an eye on right there. And I think that position is going to be huge. They got to have those young guys step into those positions and fill those quickly. None of them have had starting experience, so that's a problem right off the bat right there. In the secondary, only one returning starter from last year. Larry Scott, a senior, does return. Justin Strong at safety was their leading returning tackler from a year ago, so that's a little bit of something to keep in the back of your mind for him maybe to step up. Cyrell Nolans-Lewis is another one that they're expecting is going to be pretty good physically. So definitely a guy to keep an eye on out there as well. And then at the other corner position, it's pretty much in flux with either Dwayne Williams or Devin Chappell locking it down. Williams being a freshman, but neither one of them really are expected to be all that great. So when you look at this whole team altogether, Gary Anderson's got a lot that he's got to deal with coming in here. This is not a team that has won a whole bunch of games over these past couple of years. He's not walking into a situation like he did at Wisconsin where they were an extremely successful team. He's walking into a team that hasn't been great over these past couple of years. Even with the offense that they've got, they're going to have to find some way to try to balance out the loss of Mannion. And it's going to be really hard. When I look at it, starting a true freshman at quarterback is nearly impossible to have a whole bunch of success, especially in a conference where the quarterback talent is as good as it is in the Pac-12. So when I look at it right now, I would say Oregon State's that team that's going to be in the cellar right now, but they're a team to keep an eye on. You never really know. I mean, the bottom portion of this North is going to be pretty tight. So if they can win a couple of games, they can maybe find themselves challenging to at least be out of the basement, maybe even find themselves in a bowl game if they can win just a few more games. But, you know, definitely an uphill battle starting out for Gary Anderson. It's going to be a tough first year, but I think they got to give him some time out there. And if he can get some time, I think he can really turn this team back into what they had been, which was a team that could challenge at least for the Pac-12 North. From there, you move on, and we move on. Washington State is the team I have finishing 5th. I have them going 4-8, 2-7. When you look at Washington State, you know, Mike Leach, he's had 3 years there. He's gone 12-25. But at the same time, you get a feeling that this team's going in somewhat of the right direction. They finished 1st in the country last year in passing offense. They finished 7th in total offense. Now, rushing offense, they finished 125th, but we know that's not their focus. Their focus is to throw the ball, even though they are expecting this year for a little bit more focus on the run game. But when you look at it, Luke Falk, who had to step in last year after an injury to Connor Holiday, look at his stats from last year: 1,859 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions on just 156 completions. So he came in there, he made his impact. He's going to be the full-time starter this year, so I expect, again, the air raid, I think it'll still be in full swing. They say they want to go to more of a run-style offense, but I think Luke Falk's just going to throw it around the yard, and for good reason. I think the kid's talented. But let's say they are going to stick with what their plan is and try to run it a little more. Guys like Gerard Wicks, that's going to be their main guy. They're expecting at running back. Jamal Morrow could also factor in there, so keep an eye on him. When you look at the wide receiver position, who is Luke Falk going to have to throw to on this team this year? Losing one of their best guys that they've had really even in program history in Vince Mayo. Can't underscore losing a guy like Isaiah Myers either. Both of those guys were extremely successful a year ago. Mayo, who had over 100 catches. So, you know, losing a guy like that is not going to be easy. Now it falls into the hands of guys like Gabe Marks, a junior, River Craycraft, another junior who's a returning starter. Both of those guys will be looked on heavily, and other guys like Robert Lewis, Dom Williams, Calvin Green, and Tyler Baker will be expected to step up in those roles. True freshman Kyle Sweet and C.J. Dimry could also find their way into the rotation as the season goes along if some of these other guys aren't able to step up. So when you look at, what they've got there, I mean, that wide receiver position looks solid, but they've got to have those guys that are expected to be starters step up and play well, or else it's going to fall on the shoulders of some of these younger players. On the offensive line, this is a strength area for them, definitely, returning all 5 starters. Joe Dahl returns at the left tackle position, Cole Madison at the right tackle position, both guards returning Gunnar Euclid and Eduardo Middleton, and Riley Sorensen returns at center. So this offensive line returns, that could be a huge key for Washington State this year. If that offensive line can protect the quarterback and can open up some lanes for the running game that they want to have, you never really know what Washington State could do. If they can even become somewhat balanced and be successful still offensively while being balanced, you just never really know what this team can end up doing. When you look at their defense, they do return 6 starters from last year, so they're not in the worst of shape. Up front, they return 2 guys. They have their pass rusher, Cache Policio. He returns at the rush position. It's a hybrid linebacker slash defensive end position, so he's able to slide in there. Expect to see bigger numbers maybe even from him. Destiny Vaio is the returning defensive end. The other 2 positions, they'll have to find guys, and Daryl Paolo, who's expected to start there. Daniel Euclid is expected to start at the other position, also meaning that other guys could factor in. Junior college transfer Jeremiah Mitchell could factor in at the 1 defensive end position, and Galoo Tapa could find his way into the rotation as well. When you look at the linebacker position, Jeremiah Allison returns after having 78 tackles last year. Leading returner, expect him to step up and be even more of a presence this year. Peyton Pueller is expected to be the other linebacker, but keep an eye on junior college transfer Aaron Porter, a former UCLA recruit, to step in there and play some big minutes as well. So when you look at the linebacker position, it looks like a position of strength. The secondary, where they have 5 starters, is another position of strength. Charleston White returns. He's expected to be their leader in that secondary this year, only as a sophomore. Another sophomore, nickelback Darius Lamora. He also returns as a starter. Keep an eye on him to making a big impact. And then Isaac Dotson at the free safety takes over. He will replace a starter in Taylor Talulu, who will also factor in, but Dotson is expected to take over that starting position, as he showed something in the fall. You look at the cornerback position and the strong safety position. They do bring in 2 junior college transfers who are expected to make big impacts early, in Trayshawn Broughton and Shalom Lune. So keep an eye on those guys to step up in that secondary and make a difference here for Washington State. And they're going to have to be a lot better in that passing defense, ranked 124th in the country last year. That has to get better if they think they have any chance of trying to get up here and make any noise, even to make a bowl game, I think. But when you look at this team overall for Washington State, I think they're building towards something. I don't know if they've quite hit it yet. I have them going 4-8 overall, 2-7 in conference, as I said. So I don't think they're at the height of what they can do just quite yet. But when you look at this Washington State team, I think it's another team that's heading in the right direction. You look at the guys that are expected to start for them. A lot of these guys still have a year of eligibility left or more. You look at their quarterback, Luke Falk. He is probably expected to exhaust his eligibility here at Washington State, which means he will be here for another 2 years even after this coming year. So if they can get that stability at quarterback, they can maybe find some sort of run game, and these receivers can step up offensively. These defensive players that are young can slide in their positions and show what they have, as well as the returning starters continue what they did last year and get a little bit better. You just really never know with Washington State. They could pull out something a little bit special up there in Pullman, maybe a 7-win, 8-win season, maybe shock some people and get to what people thought Mike Leach would do up here and make these guys competitive. So moving on from there, 4th in this conference, or in this part of the conference, I have their cross-state rivals, Washington, the Huskies. When you really look at it, I think Chris Peterson, I don't think he's, I don't think people thought that it was going to be this hard when Chris Peterson first came there. I don't think they thought he would have even an 8-6 season in his first year would be that tough. And then what's happened this offseason to where now it's really setting up that he's going to be in a tough position for this coming year. I mean, people, I think, thought he was going to come in here and be exactly like he was at Boise State, be winning 12 or 13 games, but it's a whole different level of competition out here in the Pac-12. I think Washington's recruited well enough in the past, to where they've got some guys in here that are talented. But when you look at it this year, again, I got them going 4-8 and 2-7 in conference, similar to Washington State. When I look at this team, I just don't see a whole lot of talent that can prove to me that they're going to be able to make a bowl game in this tough Pac-12. Quarterback, again, another part that is unstable. A lot of these teams at the bottom of both sides of the Pac-12 here, all these guys at the bottom really are having these quarterback issues. When you look at it, they've got to figure out who they're going to start. Either K.J. Carter-Samuels is going to slide in there or true freshman Jake Browning. They're leaning towards Browning at this point. He's shown that he can play over the summer and this fall so far. But Carter-Samuels has been there a year, so keep an eye on him maybe to show himself when they end up kicking off against Boise State. They don't start out easy, so that's the thing. They got to be ready to go right out of the gate. But when you look at it, running game, they're going to have to get a little more production yards-wise from Dwayne Washington. He did have 9 touchdowns last year, but only 697 yards. He's going to have to be even better this year with the quarterback position in flux right now. He's going to have to show that he is their main guy. Lavon Coleman could also factor in there. Wide receiver position, only one real proven commodity for whoever ends up starting at quarterback. That's Jaden Mickens, the wide receiver. Guys like John Ross will have to step up in order to help out this young quarterback, as well as Dante Pettis. True freshman Isaiah Renfro can make an immediate impact when he ends up coming on campus, so keep an eye on him to make some noise out there during the early part of the season and throughout the season. At tight end, they do have a viable option in Joshua Perkins. Keep an eye on Darrell Daniels behind them as well to make some noise. So when you look at the skill positions for Washington, there is some talent there again. They recruited well enough to where there is enough talent there for Peterson to have some success. The quarterback position has to get locked down early. They can't be raging that battle on throughout the season. Dwayne Washington has to produce some more yards offensively, and there has to be another target besides Jaden Mickens that steps up. He's the leading returning receiver from last year, which is 617 yards and 4 touchdowns. So they've definitely got to have people around him to help him out and to help out whichever quarterback ends up sliding into that position. On the offensive line, this is another factor that doesn't help him, returning just 2 starters. Dexter Charles, a senior left guard, returns, and Coleman Shelton, who's a sophomore right tackle, does return. The other positions right now are all battles, and none of them are expected to be settled as they go into the year. So that is definitely something to keep an eye on. I mean, when you look at it, again, this offense, I think there are pieces in place, and if these guys do step up and live up to their ratings from when they got recruited, this team could find something offensively. But looking at their numbers from last year, they weren't that great. Now you lose a lot of starters. This is going to be even tougher for them. When I look at it, I think this team, again, with Peterson leading the way, it's just so hard to see them not having success. But it's when you look at the way that these guys line up, the offensive line is young and hasn't had a whole bunch of experience. There's not a whole lot of targets. It just sets up to where Washington looks like they're going to be that team that could struggle to definitely make a bowl game. Defensively, the strength is in the secondary, where they return 3 starters. Budda Baker, the free safety, returns. He's going to be a star. He's going to show out again in his sophomore year. He had a great freshman year, so keep an eye on him to be a big impact again this year. Kevin King, the other returning starting safety, watch for him to make his name heard throughout the year. Cornerback Sidney Jones, another sophomore. He's expected to be one of the starters out there. He had a good year last year. Expect him to have an even better year this year. And then the other cornerback position is in flux. Darren Gardenhire, as well as Jermaine Kelly, will battle for that position. But that is the strength of this team. And keep in mind, that's the strength of a team that ranked 120th last year against the pass. So that's not really saying a whole lot defensively for the Huskies. The next strength, really, when you look at it, I guess would be linebacker. They only returned one starter there in Travis Freeney. So not a whole lot is returning there. The other outside linebacker, Joe Mathis, is expected to step up. He had 2 sacks last year. Expect that number to go way up as he's starting this year. And the interior of that linebacking core, a couple of young guys going to have to step up really quick into these new roles in Keyshawn Barreria and Azim Victor. So right now, when you look at it, you know, at that linebacker position, there's some guys there. The depth behind them is pretty solid, but those young guys are going to have to really step up early on. When you look at the defensive line, none of these guys are returning starters, but expect Elijah Qualls to lead that as a sophomore at the nose tackle position. Tanalia Tupu will get the first look at defensive end as a senior, but keep an eye on Benning Patoe to slide in there as a true freshman and immediately take snaps away at that defensive end position. Jalen Johnson, a redshirt freshman, is the guy at the other side, but Vita Vala could also find himself in there as well. So, with only 4 returning starters on defense, you get 5 returners on offense. When you look at this Washington Huskies team, again, the recruiting has been good. So some of these guys are highly rated guys that just haven't lived up to their potential yet. You're wondering, will this be the year that they finally end up living up to their potential? I just think there's so much going against them. The fact that offensively you have to replace your quarterback, your running game hasn't been that great over the past couple of years. You have no receivers for whoever is in there at quarterback. And then on defense, the best unit of your defense ranked 120th last year. In their area of defense, and the rest of this team returns just 1 starter on the front 7. When I look at it, everything's pointing in the wrong direction for Washington, and I'm taking them on the lower end of what expectations would probably be this year. I got them winning 4 games. I think it's going to be a tough year, and I think winning 4 games with what people expected out of Chris Peterson, I think already people are going to start to think that maybe they hired the wrong guy. I think that's the wrong thought. I think you definitely got to give them, next year they're going to be really good. If they can get one of those quarterbacks to solidify themselves and keep themselves there for a little while, and they can get some of these young targets to step up and become threats, they could find themselves to be a pretty good team down the road here within maybe 2 or 3 years. But I just don't think they're a good enough team this year. There's just too much going against them. There's too much to replace, and this team's just a little too young, I think, to compete in that Pac-12 North and really be a factor. From there, I move on. Number 3 in the Pac-12 North, I have the Cal Golden Bears. I think this is a team, they finished 5-7 last year. They really collapsed towards the end of the season, winning just 1 of their final 7 games, and that was a win at Oregon State. So when you look at it again this year, there is talent. Jared Goff might be the sleeper to be the number 1 quarterback picked in next year's draft, an extremely talented quarterback. You look at his numbers from last year, 3,973 yards, 35 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. The man has a cannon. He's accurate. He is a guy that's going to be a superstar in this conference, and he's going to throw for a lot of yards. They were ranked 6th in passing offense in the country last year. He's going to find ways to spread the ball around. It's just whether or not the rest of this team can step up. At the running back position, they are going to go with Daniel Lasco, who had a great year last year. He ran for over 1,000 yards, 1,115 with 12 touchdowns on 210 attempts. And expect him to have numbers similar to that again this year. But if for some reason he does struggle or ends up going down with an injury, keep an eye on Vic Inwire to slide in there and create some yards out of the backfield. You look at the wide receiver positions, there is some talent that returns here. Bryce Treggs, who's been there a while, he returns as a senior. Expect him to be the go-to target. But keep an eye on Kenny Lawler, who had 54 receptions for 701 yards, 9 touchdowns a year ago. Keep an eye on him to definitely factor in as well. Trevor Davis, a senior at the position, could also factor in. Maurice Harris is a starter from last year who will have to try to work his way into the rotation. Steven Anderson will be in there as well. And some young guys could end up finding their way in there, in Jack Austin and Ray Hudson before the end of the season. So all sorts of receiving threats here. They've got a 1,000-yard rusher in Lasco who could maybe even improve on that again this year. So everything offensively would seem to point to them having success. And then you look at the offensive line. Jordan Rigsby is one of the better guards in the conference at that right guard position. At the other guard position, Chris Barreo returns. Left tackle Stephen Moore returns as well. Matt Cochran is a talented center who's expected to start this year. And Brian Farley is the other tackle. He'll be expected to slide in there immediately and see some good snaps. So when you look at it, offensively for this Cal Golden Bears team, everything points to them having a lethal offense. Great quarterback, a running game that, even though it ranked 84th in the country last year, you had 1,000-yard rushers, so that's something that's definitely good. You have the receiving threats all over the field. There's a number of them that could factor in, and all of them with experience, and the depth behind them is extremely deep. And then on the offensive line, you return 3 starters, and the guys that are coming in there to replace the departed starters look like they're going to fill in those roles just fine. The defensive side of the ball is a little bit of a different story. You start not really an extreme strength anywhere on this defense. They ranked 121st in total defense, 120th in scoring defense, and worst of all, 125th in pass defense. So really, when you look at it, you got to think the rush defense is the best part of this defense. So that would probably focus on the linebacker position. Michael Barton and Jalen Jefferson both return, but they both return at the same position, which means Jalen Jefferson is not expected to start. He'll probably end up finding his way in there, though, before the season is over. Both of them are talented. Barton had 80 tackles last year. Jefferson should find his way into the rotation. Keep an eye on middle linebacker Hardy Nickerson to step up and have a good year this year. And other linebackers that could factor in could be Jake Kearney and Maximo Esposito. On the defensive line, guys that'll have to try to get in there to penetrate for the rushing offense. They got to be a lot better at pass rushing again this year in order to try to cut down on teams being able to pass like they did a year ago on them. The main guy up front will be defensive tackle Mustafa Jalil, former highly recruited player. Now he's expected to slide into that leadership role and take over. At the other defensive tackle position, keep an eye on James Loney to try to step up and make his name heard in some of those backfields. Kyle Cregan is going to be the one defensive end, as well as Puka Lopa will be the other defensive end. Keep an eye on guys like Devontae Wilson and Noah Westerfield to factor in there before the season is over. So the defensive line, they just have to get some more pressure on these guys, because when you really look at it, there's not a whole lot you can do if you're not getting a pass rush on any of these quarterbacks. If you just let some of these quarterbacks in the Pac-12 stand back there, they're going to throw on you for numerous yards. That's just how it works in this conference. It's a high-scoring conference, and especially with the arms that they've had in this conference in the past, you've got to be able to initiate some pressure. At the cornerback and safety position, the secondary, only one returning starter is expected to start. They do have another one in Cedric Dozier at the cornerback position, but he did not perform well last year. He's expected to be a backup corner this year. Stephen McClure is the only returning starter that is expected to start. Expect him to become a leader in that secondary. Keep an eye on Griffin Piott. He had 3 interceptions a year ago. Look for him to step up, and keep an eye on former quarterback recruit Luke Rubinser, also at that safety position, to see if he can step up as well. At the cornerback position, Darius White is expected to be one of the starting corners. They're expecting him to have a good year, and also keep an eye on Darius Allensworth to factor in to be the other corner. Keep an eye on Antone Albert, an incoming junior college transfer. He can make an impact early on in that secondary as well. Overall, when you look at this Cal team, I think offensively they're going to be perfectly fine. I think that's what ends up winning them 5 games. But I think the defense is what's going to lose them the 7 games. That's going to keep them out of playing in a bowl. Actually, when I went through it, I just finished today actually going through my national, writing down my national preview. I ranked all at 128 teams, and with all the new bowl games that they're expecting, they would actually make a bowl at 5-7. So they may end up making a bowl, but I see them being below 6-6. So if they, if it works out to where teams do make it, they wouldn't end up making it on my predictions. I just don't when you look at this defense, you return basically 4 starters because I do think Jefferson will find his way in there. I think Dozier is going to be a backup. But when I look at it, I think, this Cal team has the offensive talent. They've got to get some sort of defense. If they can even get enough defense, maybe to hold that ranks just inside the hundreds or in the 90s in total defense and in scoring defense, this team might find a way to win 8 games. They might find a way to win 9 games and get up here and shock some of these teams. But I think their defense is just that bad that they won't be able to find any stability this year. The schedule is just a little too tough for them, especially with them getting both Oregon and Stanford, the powerhouses in this part of the conference, on the road. They also get UCLA and Utah on the road in crossovers as well. So, when you look at it for this Cal team, I think the schedule just doesn't set up to where they're going to be able to win enough games, I think, to get to 6-6 and get to a bowl game. But this is a team that could end up really showing us that if they get a defense in place, they are going to be that good offensively that they can maybe get up near the top of this Pac-12 North and maybe shock Oregon or Stanford. So the top 2 in the Pac-12 North, I think it's as most people expected. It's going to be Stanford and it's going to be Oregon. Stanford, when you look at it, I do have them finishing second, but I have them being a lot better than most people have them being. I think a lot of people have them around 8-4, maybe 7-5 this year. But when I looked at their schedule, I really saw 10 wins from them. I think this team is talented. Their problem last year was red zone efficiency. They couldn't score once they got down near the red zone. They just stalled. I don't think that's going to be a problem this year. I think it starts, when you look at the quarterback position, Kevin Hogan has another year, another offseason in this offense. When he's not that superstar quarterback, he's not Andrew Luck. That was a lot to live up to, but it's a lot more stability than they had right after Andrew Luck left. You look at his numbers from last year. 2,792 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. Those aren't bad numbers, especially for the type of offense that he plays in. It was just that when they got in the red zone, especially in crucial games like Notre Dame, like that loss to USC early in the year where they lost that game 13-10 and had numerous opportunities to score and couldn't find a way to put it in the end zone. I think Hogan's going to know what to do in those situations. He's seen that last year. I think they're going to definitely be working on that throughout spring and summer practice out there on the farm. So if they can get that fixed, I think Hogan's going to have another good year. I think he's going to even improve on those passing numbers and show that he can really be that dual threat force that they want him to be. They're gonna have some success. The running back position, Christian McCaffrey, I have a feeling he's just going to go off. He showed some sparks of it late last year, and now I think he's going to be the full-time running back. I think he's going to really show that he can lead this team to where they want to go. From the running back position, he's going to come out of the backfield catching passes as well. So keep an eye on him. Leading returning rusher Raymond Wright could factor in as well in the running game. He had 601 yards last year, 11 touchdowns as well, so they don't want to count him out completely. So he may even factor in there, as well as Barry Sanders' son. Barry Sanders, I don't know if he's going by junior. I think he still is. I think it's still Barry Sanders Jr. He could factor in there as well. I can't put him out. Can't put him in the background because he was extremely talented as a recruit as well. So keep an eye on all of those guys to definitely factor in, but McCaffrey's the main guy. When you look at the wide receiver position, Devin Kajuse does return from last year. He's their main go-to guy at the wide receiver position. So definitely great to have him back, back for another year. Guy for Hogan to throw to. That's a big target down near the end zone. I really like Kajuse, and I think he's going to have a good year this year. The other expected starter is going to be Francis Owusu. Had a couple of those brothers run through there, and he's another one that's expected to be extremely talented. Keep an eye on Michael Rector to also find his way in there as well on some of these pass-catching downs, some of these long third downs. Tight end position where they've always been extremely strong, Austin Hooper, that's their leading returning receiver from a year ago with 40 catches, 499 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Expect more production from him, especially in the red zone. Gotta look for him in the red zone, and we could even see some a little bit of playing time for backup tight end Dalton Schultz, a talented guy. So, I mean, when you look at this, this Stanford offense, I think the strength then is on the offensive line. They returned 4 starters. They returned both guards in Joshua Garnett and Johnny Caspers, both of them extremely talented. Kyle Murphy returns at the 1 tackle position, left tackle, and center they return Graham Schuler. The only area they are looking for someone is that right tackle position in a battle between 2 sophomores, Casey Tucker and David Bright. Both of them are talented as well. So if they can find someone up there to cover that right side, this team is going to be in perfectly fine shape. I think they've got the right quarterback in there for now. I think he's definitely the guy they got to go with, and I think he's talented enough to win them football games. I think he's going to improve on his numbers from last year and that efficiency in the red zone. They've got the running game. They've got 3 guys that can carry the ball. McCaffrey's going to be a star this year. I think he really is going to show people how good he really is. The wide receiver position, they have receiving threats. Kajust is going to show out, I think, this year. Owusu could definitely have a good year. Same thing with Rector. And you can't forget about the tight end position. I think Hooper's going to have a big year at the tight end position. Offensive line is the strength with 4 returning starters. A lot of those guys will be in Pac-12, all Pac-12 conversations. A couple of them even could be in the All-American talk. And that's just the offense that we're talking about for Stanford. We haven't even talked about their strength, which is their defense. Group that ranked 3rd in total defense a year ago, 2nd in scoring defense a year ago. This team's always great defensively under Harbaugh and now under Shaw, and I don't think anything's going to change this year. The strength of this defense for this season is at the linebacker position. Even though they've lost a couple of guys, you look, they do return their starting middle linebacker, Blake Martinez, had 102 tackles last year. Expect for him to be a star, All-American watch list guy. I think he's probably behind Scooby Wright. He might be the best linebacker in this conference. He's going to really have a great year, I believe. Peter Columbi will be on the 1 outside linebacker position. He's not even a returning starter from last year. Expect him to have some pretty good numbers, pass rushing off the outside. He had 6.5 sacks, not even being a starter last year. Those numbers could go up again this year. Another returning starter at the other outside linebacker position, Kevin Anderson. Expect him to have some good numbers again this year. The only area they're looking for a starter for sure is that second inside linebacker position. Kevin Palma is expected to be the starter there. Nord Davis could factor in there as well before the end of the season. And keep an eye on former tight end Luke Kumalate to make some noise off the outside as a pass rusher at those outside linebacker positions as well. From there, you move into the secondary. They did end up losing a couple of guys here with Alex Carter having departed for the NFL, as well as safety Jordan Richards. Wayne Lyons moved over to Michigan to go with former coach Jim Harbaugh. So there is a little bit to replace here, but Ronnie Harris, a senior, does return there. That's a huge returnee right there. Expect him to have a good year. At the 1 safety position, they do return one of their starters from last year, and Zach Hofsper. Expect him to have another great year this year and be the leader in that secondary. At the other safety position, Cody Whitfield, a former wide receiver, is expected to be the starter there. Keep an eye on former quarterback recruit Dallas Lloyd, who's been a safety for a couple of years, to maybe take that spot from him. But both of those guys have looked great reportedly in the spring and summer camps. At the other cornerback position, redshirt freshman Alameen Murphy is expected to slide in there, but keep an eye on Terrence Alexander, a former 4-star recruit. Expect him to maybe slide in there as well and factor in that secondary. The defensive line, I think, is the real concerning area of this defense for Stanford, and that's saying a lot. There is some expected talent here, guys that haven't really shown up just yet. Aziz Chatou, he's expected to be the leader of this defensive line at the defensive end position. He's a senior. He was a highly touted recruit. He's got to end up working out now with one last chance. Expect Harrison Phillips at the nose tackle position, a sophomore. Expect him to have to step up and play a lot better this year. And they do end up landing a huge transfer in Brandon Scarlett, who has 1 more year left. He transferred from Cal. Very rare you're going to see that, Cal to Stanford, but he's going to slide into the starting lineup immediately. Expect him to slide in there and maybe be a force as well. Keep an eye on Solomon Thomas, redshirt freshman from last year, to slide in as well in some of these cases, and he may find himself some definite snaps if he can show that he can be the pass rushing force that they expected. So when you look at this Stanford team, again, the defense, I think, is going to be talented again. I think they're going to be another top 10 defense. The only question is on the defensive line, and I think those guys will be fine. Some of them, they are extremely talented guys, and I think, there actually is so much talent there that, let's say, guys, Shatu doesn't work out there at the one defensive end position, they can just slide Solomon Thomas up there, a young guy, and see what he can do. And he's got that talent that he could be able to get in there and affect these guys. This defense is going to be stout again. This offense, I think, is going to be much more efficient than last year. The pieces are in place. They have a running game. They have enough of a passing game. I think this Stanford team is nowhere near what people think they are. I think this team is going to get back to where they were a couple of years ago with these results. I got them going 10-2, 7-2 in conference. They're going to be right there. I think it comes down to that game that will be played. It could come down to that game that will be played November 14th on the Forum in Palo Alto. But, even I actually have Stanford beating Oregon, but I think Oregon, looking at their schedule, there's just not another loss there for Oregon. So I think when I look at it, I think Stanford's going to have a great year. I think they're going to be challenging them. I think they're going to be right outside the playoff, but having those two losses, I think, is what will keep them out of the playoff. And I think this Stanford team, though, will be back in the conversation next year to definitely get up into there and bust the playoff next year and make some noise. So with that, that means that Oregon is the winner of the Pac-12 North. They will win another Pac-12 North title. They will play in another Pac-12 championship game. Again, looking at this team, the big story for this team, I think, has to be the quarterback battle that has gone on over the offseason and is extending towards the start of the year. Now, the thing about this quarterback battle, there's been a little bit of controversy off the field that's helped along this quarterback battle and has slowed them from picking their guy. Vernon Adams, they got him to transfer from Eastern Washington. Extremely talented guy who has torn up Pac-12 defenses the last couple of times he's played them. Usually Eastern Washington's been starting off with someone from the Pac-12 every year, and they ended up beating, I believe it was Oregon State that they beat. They gave Washington a run last year. So when I look at it, I think, when he came in, when I saw that they had brought him in, I thought, what a great job they did to bring him in there. He's going to be great. But then they ran into the issues of him not being apparently graduating from Eastern Washington. He had to take some sort of test to be able to graduate from there, and that extended up until just about a week ago. So now they finally got that completely situated out. Now it's really just all about football with Vernon Adams now officially enrolled there. But the thing is, he's that talented that they've been holding out. Normally, even with the guy that they tried their hardest to get in there, they would have just gone to Jeff Locke. But this quarterback battle is not over. You cannot count Jeff Locke out. He's got a lot of talent. He's been there longer. He's been in this system longer. So I think, ultimately, I think they will go with Vernon Adams. Just because of the talent of Vernon Adams. I think Lockheed's the man they should go with because he's been there longer, but they will go with Vernon Adams. Either one of them is a good enough choice to lead this team, and I think Vernon Adams is going to show the Pac-12 what he's really made of with a high-powered offense like Oregon. When you look at the Ducks, all around him, it doesn't matter who starts, they're going to have talent around him. At the running back position, they do return Royce Freeman. He just ran for a pedestrian 1,365 yards last year and 18 touchdowns. He had a sensational year. And, he was splitting carries. And again, he'll be splitting carries a little bit with Thomas Tyner again this year. Even if they shift the focus just even a little more to him and take a few carries away from Tyner, he could end up cracking 1,500, maybe even getting up into the 1,700 range and into the Heisman talks if he can end up staying healthy. But either one of those running backs are talented, and they've got plenty more behind them that can end up finding their way onto the field as well at the running back position. The wide receiver position, again, there is talent here. as well. Dwayne Stanford is the main returning starter from a year ago. Byron Marshall as well. He had 74 catches, 1,003 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He's going to be the main go-to guy. Stanford as well is expected to be a huge target. Keep an eye on Darren Carrington, who had some off-the-field issues. He is suspended, so he may not be able to be on the field for this season for an extended period of time or a short period of time. We really don't know what the situation is with him. And the injury to Devin Allen could keep him out for a while as well. So that's another talented receiver that they do lose. A guy returning from a knee injury from last year, Braylon Addison, expect him to have some big numbers as well. Jaylen Brown's expected to come in there, and after being redshirted from last year, expect him to make his name heard early on. He's expected to actually be a starter. And true freshman Alex Ofadile could also find some time at receiver. So when you look at this team, you know, with the receiving core that they have, there is talent there. They've got to get these guys to stay healthy, get Carrington back on the field, and I think they'll be fine. At the tight end position, they did lose Pharaoh Brown to a knee injury. Don't really know if he'll be back this year. I don't think he's going to be back this year. So if he's not, then the pressure falls on Evan Bayless and Johnny Munt to take over that position. I think Bayless is capable, but Bayless is more of a blocking tight end than anything. So I think it's really going to be more on these wide receivers for Vernon Adams to have to throw to, which I don't think it's going to be anything different for him. At Eastern Washington, I believe they ran an air raid offense, so he's used to having 3 or 4 wide receivers on the field at all times. On the offensive line, this is a team that's not quite as talented on the offensive line as they have been in the past, but there still is some talent here. Cameron Hunt is a returning starter at right guard. Keep an eye on Terrell Crosby, the returning right tackle. Both of them are extremely talented. Tyler Johnstone is the left tackle. He's returning from injury. He's expected to play a pretty decent role, as well as the center, Matt Pearson. He is a returning starter. Left guard, Jake Persirsic and Evan Voller will battle there at that left guard position. Both of them are talented, so it doesn't really matter. But this is not as strong of an offensive line as they have had in the past at Oregon. Most of those offensive lines have been very experienced. This one's a little younger than some of these ones in the past, so keep an eye on that to maybe become a factor for this offense. But when you look at this offense, no one's really going to go against this offense. It's not smart to go against this offense because people have tried to go against this offense in the past and say, well, they're not as talented as they've been in previous years. So I don't think they're going to have a great year offensively. I think they're going to have a fine year offensively. They're going to run the ball extremely well with Vernon Adams and with Royce Freeman, Thomas Tyner, anyone you throw in there. Then, you know, whenever they drop back to pass, Adams is going to have some wide receivers available to him. Marshall is expected to be his main go-to target. Dwayne Stanford, as well as Braylon Addison, coming back from a knee injury. If they can get Carrington off a suspension, Devin Allen healthy, you just don't really know what this team could do, even with, you know, some of these young wide receivers, these freshmen that could slide in there as well. The offensive line, there's talent, but not as much as in the past, so they can't really rely on that to be their strong suit. But I think overall, this offense for Oregon, I think they're going to be one of the best offenses in the country again this year, for sure. It's just a staple under these coaches that they've had in there these past about 5 to 7 years under Chip Kelly and Mark Helfrich. They're always up there offensively with some of the best in the country. When you look at the defense for Oregon, it's a little bit different, especially in year 2 without Aliotti there. You know, they were all right last year. The passing defense last year was a disaster, so they've got to get that figured out. But when you look at this team, up front is where their strength is at this year. You look at it, DeForest Buckner, huge news that he was returning after they lost Eric Armstead. They actually were more happy that they kept him over trying to go keep Eric Armstead. So they're extremely happy that they were able to keep Buckner. Expect him to play a huge role this year. Alex Balducci at the defensive tackle position, expect him as a returning starter to step up in a big role this year. The other defensive end position, TJ Daniel, is expected to be the starter, but keep an eye on Tui Talia to play a role there as well. The next strength would be that linebacker position. There are some guys that do return that are extreme strengths of this group last year. Rodney Hardwick, the middle linebacker, he is back from last year. He's expected to be the leader of this group, so keep an eye on him to play a bigger role this year. Tyson Coleman at the one outside linebacker position, another returning starter. He's been having a good past couple of years, but he's going to have to be even better this year to try to boost some of these sack numbers for Oregon, where they struggled at last year. When you look at the other outside linebacker position, Christian French actually leads the returners with 6.5 sacks from last year. Expect those numbers to possibly go up this year, and they're definitely hoping so if they want to create any sort of presence pass rushing. At the other inside linebacker position, Joe Walker is expected to start there, but also keep an eye on Jamie Swain to find himself in the rotation there at that other inside linebacker position. In the secondary, a position where they struggled last year, they do return Reggie Daniels, their leading tackler, with 83 a year ago. Expect him to be more looked at in pass coverage this year and to try to solidify that back end for Oregon if they want to try to cut down on those yards that they allowed a year ago, 264.3 a game. They definitely have to cut down on that number. Tyree Robinson, an extremely talented young safety, is at the other safety position. He'll start outright this year and expect him to make a huge impact. At the other positions in this secondary, the two cornerback positions, Chris Cece is expected to lock down the one cornerback position. He is a returning starter. He is a returning starter, basically, from last year. He played enough of a role last year and took over for Ifo Ekpreolomu when he went down with an injury. So expect him to have to step up in his role, and I think he's going to be fine. At the other cornerback position, this is where a problem arises. Former wide receiver recruit Charles Nelson now has moved over to corner. Expect him to try to make an impact. He's expected to be the starter right now. But Arian Springs, who was brought in as a corner, talented guy from last year, expect him to play a bigger role this year and make some noise. And Hugo Amadi as well, a redshirt freshman, expect him also to try to step in there and find some time in that secondary. When you look at this Oregon team, I think the offense is what leads this group again this year, but I think this defense is going to be improved over what they were last year. I think their sack totals will be a lot better this year. They have the talent on this defense. They really do. It's just, you know, when you look at Oregon, they were one of those teams that were usually under the radar when it came to defense. They were good, but they weren't really that flashy defense. And now with Aliotti leaving, I think last year was a tough transition year. I think Don Pelham's defense is going to be a little bit better this year. Losing Eric Armstead was tough, but I don't think it was as tough as people think it's going to be on them. I think Buckner's going to step up this year. I think the linebackers are going to be perfectly fine this year. I think those sack numbers will go up. And if they can even remotely match what they did last year with a plus 23 turnover margin, I don't think Oregon has to worry about anything. With that offense, I think this team's going to win 10 games. I got them going 10-2. You know, just looking at it, though, I don't think they're going to be able to compete on the road at Michigan State week 2. I mean, it'll be a competitive game, but I don't think they'll be able to beat them out there. And then at Stanford, I have them losing. But they only one loss in conference. They're back in the Pac-12 championship, and I think they'll be fine. I think they find themselves into a New Year's Six bowl. And I think everything in Eugene will be all right, at least for another season. Expectations will be high, though, I think, going into next year. So when you look at the Pac-12 North, we figured it out. Like I said, Oregon will take it. I think Stanford will finish second. Third will be Cal. Fourth will be Washington. Fifth will be Washington State. And sixth will be Oregon State. When you look at the Pac-12 North overall, it's very top-heavy. The top two teams are going to be extremely talented. They'll be right there in playoff contention, and the rest of the teams will really just be hanging out trying to get some bowl berths. So I'm done with this episode right now, guys. I'm running really close to the hour that I do have. So, done with the Pac-12 North. Going to shift over to the Pac-12 South. If you want to see that one, go ahead and check it out for me, which I'll film right here after this one. So thank you guys for watching. And like I said, you want to check out the Pac-12 South, head over to my next episode.